Welcome back to Loners and Rebels. I'm Heidi. Before we start, a quick note. This story deals with my ancestors' ties to Nazi Germany, propaganda, and the Holocaust. It's not sensational and it's not comfortable. If you need to skip it, I get it. I'm not telling this for shock value. I'm telling it because silence and denial let this kind of thing happen, and it can happen again. This is about my grandfather, a man I never met, a man my mother loved, and a man who made choices I'll never understand. This isn't a redemption story. It's a reckoning. For him, for my family tree, and for me. Let's start where every family secret starts, with silence. I grew up knowing nothing about my grandfather. Nothing. My mom never talked about him. I thought once she left Germany, that was it. New life, clean slate. All I knew was that he died when she was a teenager. My mom told me he went to the hospital with a sore throat and never came home. He had cancer and died within 3 days of being taken to the hospital in a black taxi cab. I had no name, no story, no photo. Then one day, snooping through her things, I saw his name. Adolf. Instant chills. I'd never seen anyone with that name except that Adolf. And I remember thinking, oh, this is why we don't talk about him. Other kids had grandparents. I had a huge question mark. So I started digging. In 2014, I rebuilt an ancestry tree. The first thing I found wasn't dramatic, just a city directory. But it meant he existed. Finally, something real. But the resources at the time were minimal, and I was very new to genealogy. I didn't pick it back up for many years out of frustration. My mom didn't talk about her dad much. When she did, it was almost too sweet. She said he was a train conductor, that she used to visit him at work, that he was the closest person to her. The way she talked about him, you'd think he hung the moon. And that's what makes this so hard. Because to her, he wasn't a Nazi. He was Papa. The man who held her hand while they looked for their belongings in pawn shops after the war. That image kills me. When I started telling people what I found, the whitewashing started. Maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe he was forced. No, unfortunately he wasn't. My dad had once told me that my mom's father was an SS officer. Also incorrect. He was a barber after denazification, like half the country suddenly was. Stripped of their government jobs and titles and forced into a trade. People will do Olympic-level mental gymnastics to protect an image. These aren't stories to hide. They're warnings. Once I started digging, it was game over. Full-on detective mode. Picture me like Charlie from Always Sunny, wall of string, wild eyes, caffeine-fueled clarity. Those directories, they weren't boring. Tedious, but most definitely not boring. They were breadcrumbs. They let me track him. Location, year, pattern, professions. Then I saw it. Reichsbahn. The German National Railway. That was the first gut punch. Then came newspapers. He's listed as an expert marksman, part of a traveling gun club called Teutonia. Not evil on its own, but in 1930s Germany, context matters. This was sus. Then I found the Nazi party paper. Der Hakenkreuzbanner, the swastika banner. And there he was. Party comrade Adolf Menzer. Leaving Eidingen, relocating to Mannheim, praised for pioneering work for the party. My mother's father, the man she adored. Seeing that in print made the air leave the room, and my hands still shake. Later, I learned about the Reichsbahn's role in the Holocaust, the transport system that sent roughly 3 million people to their deaths. Historian Dr. Alfred Mierzejewski called it what it was, the machinery of death. And my grandfather worked there as an operations assistant. It has wrecked me, but it also made me look at myself. I grew up with a father who had what you'd now call MAGA views, fear and patriotism dressed up as pride. And when that's the air you breathe, some of it sticks. I'm sure I've said ignorant things or made assumptions I shouldn't have, not because I believed that garbage, but because I didn't know better yet. Most of my friends growing up weren't white, so I knew the world wasn't that narrow, but it still took time to unlearn some of the reflexes you pick up from living in that kind of noise. It's not an excuse, it's just how it happens, and that's the point. How ordinary people start repeating things without realizing what they're part of. Anger, fascination, sadness, mostly clarity. Post-World War I Germany was a perfect storm. Humiliation, poverty, and chaos. For someone like my grandfather, wounded, fatherless, and angry, it must have felt like salvation when someone offered order and pride. By the time Adolf came home, his entire world had collapsed. His brother Ludwig died in Field Hospital 10 after months of agony from a wound received in the Carpathian Front in 1915. Wilhelm spent 1917 as a POW, surviving on starvation rations in the East. And Adolf himself showed up on the wounded list in 1918, marked leicht verwundet, lightly wounded, which is military shorthand for hit, bleeding, but not dead yet. Their father, Philip, had already died in 1916, leaving the younger boys without any anchor at all. So when Adolf came back, he wasn't returning to a stable family or a stable country. He was walking into grief, poverty, humiliation, and a government that had nothing left to give men like him. Every door was closed, every path was blocked, and every wound, physical and otherwise, was untreated. This is what shapes people, not ideology, not grand plans. Just loss stacked on loss, until anger starts to feel like direction and certainty starts to feel like salvation. He wanted more than his father's blue-collar life. He wanted respect, purpose, and meaning. And the party offered all of that, wrapped in poison. Pride, vanity, revenge, the perfect cocktail. He wasn't some mastermind, he was a bootlicker. A man who traded critical thought for belonging and power. These things don't start with monsters. They start with men like him, broken people looking for control. And the patterns now, we're watching it again. Freedom stripped little by little. It starts small, testing what people will tolerate, and then it snowballs. Women's rights vanish, neighbors disappear, and the world keeps turning. That's how it starts. My mom's silence was its own language. A whole generation was born into it. They didn't have a choice. She wasn't taught the truth, but she also didn't go looking. I get it. You can't unsee what you find. But I'd rather know. That silence seeps in. It made me curious and resentful, like I came from outer space. Everyone else had family stories. I had a blank spot. When people don't talk, ignorance mutates. It slips through generations. Leaving it buried just gives it more power. This isn't some healing journey. It's messy. I'm ashamed of parts of it, proud I faced it, still figuring out what it means. It's the opposite of finding the Monroes. They fought for freedom. This feels like gravity, a very unpleasant weighted blanket. I'd rather live with the weight of the truth than the comfort of not knowing. My mom's silence felt like being treated as too fragile for reality. It didn't protect me, it made me obsessed. Both of my parents kept things from me. They liked me living in a bubble. But I've always known when someone's lying by omission. Even as a kid, I could smell it. Now, after therapy, I get it. I need openness. No secrets, no decoding. Just say the thing. If I ever sat across from him, my grandfather, I don't even know where I would start. What do you say to someone who helped build a machine like that? The image that always comes to my mind is from Inglourious Basterds. There's this scene where Donnie Donowitz, the bear Jew, steps out of a tunnel with a baseball bat. You know what's coming. He is calm, focused, walking towards Sergeant Ruckman, a Nazi who thinks he's still in control, still righteous. Then he isn't. That scene isn't about violence. It's about what happens when arrogance meets consequence. That's how I feel about him and everyone like him. The ones who believed cruelty made them strong, who thought obedience was virtue, who took pride in being on the side that got to decide who mattered. So yeah, I do picture myself as Donnie Donowitz and him as Sergeant Ruckman. Not because I want revenge, but because that's the only thing that comes close to how it feels to look at what they did and realize that they thought it was okay. What feels most familiar right now is what ICE is doing in our country. A friend texted me recently and told me that her coworker got picked up. It's happening again in real time. History doesn't repeat, it just changes uniforms. Propaganda is slicker now. Better lighting, better microphones. Whole networks pumping out lies nonstop, and people eat it up. It doesn't need to be true, it just needs to be loud. The audience, same as before. Ignorant, bitter, scared. People who want someone else to blame. Anger sold as patriotism. What scares me the most is that there is no end in sight. They're being allowed to keep going because nobody in power is stopping them. But people are fighting back. That's what matters. Protest, pushback, voting. People refusing to go numb. When I think about him now, not as a name, but as a man, it's shame and anger. Shame that he's part of my bloodline. Anger that he chose what he chose. Learning the truth broke the illusion that everyone already knew this story. It turns out they didn't. Germany didn't even start teaching it in schools until the 60s, taking accountability. And when they finally did, it wasn't to hide it or water it down. They faced it. They put it in front of students openly because the only way forward was to own it. And that's what responsibility looks like. And honestly, I wish every country did the same. Maybe I'm weird for wanting to know, but I'll take weird over ignorant. I thought I was empathetic before. Now I really understand what that means. My husband had ancestors who died in the Holocaust. My grandfather might have helped put them on that train. That's not poetic, it's literal, and our job now is to make sure it never happens again. As for why I'm telling it, I don't totally know. Maybe because silence built this mess. Maybe because someone else out there is digging too. Or maybe it's just because I can. Maybe that's enough. And here's what I've come to understand. I don't carry my grandfather's guilt. I carry the responsibility to look at what happened, name it honestly, and not pretend it wasn't there. That's the only part that belongs to me. And if there's anything to take from all of this, it's that the truth doesn't break you. It actually steadies you. It gives you a place to stand. Thank you for listening and for walking through this with me. This has been Loners and Rebels. I'm Heidi, and I'll see you in the next episode.